In the vast darkness between stars, where ancient civilizations had learned to whisper their prayers and hide their children, something stirred that had not moved for 1,000 years. The Devourers had awakened. Across 17 star systems, desperate voices cried out through quantum channels, begging for salvation from races that had mastered peace but forgotten war. They called to anyone who would listen, anyone who might still remember how to fight. They should have been more careful about who answered. When humanity received that first distress signal, a broken transmission filled with alien tears and the screech of dying worlds, they didn't hesitate. They didn't debate. They didn't ask for payment or territorial concessions. They simply asked one question: where do you need us? What the galaxy was about to learn was that when you call upon humanity for aid, you don't get peacekeepers. You don't get diplomats or negotiators. You get predators and starships, carrying the fury of a species that had clawed its way up from a death world, learned war from necessity, and perfected it through love of their own. The aliens had called for aid. Humanity was bringing something far more dangerous. Hope delivered at the speed of light, wrapped in fire and steel. The transmission arrived at Soul's Edge on a Tuesday, carried by quantum waves that rippled through space-time like a scream through water. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun was finishing her third cup of coffee aboard the monitoring station Hermes when the alert chimed, breaking the comfortable silence of deep space duty. The signal was wrong from the first moment. Not wrong in the way of equipment failure or cosmic interference, but wrong in the way that made the hair on Chen's neck rise and her combat instincts, honed through 3 border conflicts and 2 pirate sweeps, snapped to attention. The frequency was impossible, modulated in ways that human science hadn't achieved, carrying data compression ratios that suggested technology centuries beyond Earth's current capabilities. "Ma'am," Ensign Torres called from the communications array, his young face pale in the blue glow of the displays. "You need to hear this. The computer's been working on translation for the past 20 minutes, and it's not good." Chun crossed the small bridge in 3 strides, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal deck plates. The Hermes was old, built back when humanity's reach barely extended past Mars, but it was reliable and positioned perfectly to catch long-range communications from the galactic plane. In 15 years of service, Chun had intercepted everything from merchant shipping manifests to what appeared to be alien poetry. This was different. The speakers crackled to life, and the voice that emerged was hauntingly beautiful, melodic in a way that suggested vocal cords designed for music rather than speech. But the words, translated into stilted English by the computer's best approximation algorithms, carried a terror that made Chen's blood run cold. "Please, anyone who receives this transmission, we are the melodic consortium of the third spiral. Our worlds burn. The Devourers have returned from the deep dark. They consume everything: planets, moons, stars themselves. We have 17 worlds left. Please. We remember the old songs that speak of warrior races in the outer rim. Please." The transmission dissolved into static, then repeated, and repeated, and repeated. Torres was staring at the readouts with wide eyes. "Ma'am, the signal's broadcasting on every quantum frequency simultaneously. It's reaching across at least 40 star systems. Whatever sent, this has power output that should theoretically require a star to fuel it." Chun studied the waveform analysis scrolling across her screens. The signal had been broadcast exactly 14 hours ago, which meant it had traveled roughly 4,000 light-years to reach Sol. The implications made her stomach turn. If the transmission was accurate, if something was indeed consuming star systems in the galactic core, then humanity wasn't dealing with raiders or pirates or even a conventional war. They were looking at extinction-level devastation on a scale that defied imagination. "Get me Admiral Harrison," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the chill running down her spine. "Priority Alpha, full encryption, and keep monitoring all frequencies. If there are more signals like this..." "Already on it, ma'am." "And, Commander, there's something else. The computer's been analyzing the linguistic patterns in the transmission. The translation algorithms are getting better with each repetition, and they've identified what appears to be historical references. The Melodic Consortium isn't just calling for help. They're specifically calling for those who make war as others make art, and the children of the burning world who learn to sail the void. Chun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air of the station. They're calling for us. Specifically. Yes, ma'am. The question is, how do they know about us? The connection to Earth Naval Command took 18 minutes to establish through the quantum relay network. When Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his expression was already grim. At 63, Harrison had commanded humanity's first contact protocols for 2 decades, but the careful diplomatic frameworks and cultural exchange programs suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. Commander Chun, I'm looking at your preliminary report. Are you certain about these readings? As certain as I can be, sir. The signal is definitely extrasolar, definitely artificial, and definitely indicates a galactic-scale crisis. The linguistic analysis suggests the broadcasters have prior knowledge of human space presence, though we've never made contact with any civilization called the Melodic Consortium. Harrison's jaw tightened. There's something you need to know. This isn't the first signal. 3 other monitoring stations have picked up similar transmissions over the past 6 hours. Different sources, different languages, but the same message. Something called the Devourers is systematically destroying inhabited systems, and multiple alien civilizations are calling specifically for human military intervention. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. Sir, with respect, how is that possible? Our furthest exploration missions have barely reached 50 light-years from Sol. We've found evidence of ancient civilizations, some ruins, a few automated probes, but no active contact. That's what we thought. Harrison paused, and Chin could see him making a decision that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. We're implementing First Contact Protocol 7. I'm ordering all deep space monitoring stations to full alert status, and all naval assets to prepare for immediate deployment. But first, we need more information. What are your orders, sir? I'm sending you the coordinates for a response transmission. The Xenolinguistics Department has put together what they believe is a comprehensible response in the same quantum format as the alien broadcasts. You're going to reply to the Melodic Consortium and tell them that humanity received their message and is prepared to render assistance. Chun felt her heart skip. Sir, are we actually prepared to render assistance against something that's apparently consuming star systems? Harrison's smile was sharp and cold, the expression of a man who had spent his career preparing for scenarios that he hoped would never come to pass. Commander, humanity has spent the last 2 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. We've built warships designed to function in conditions that would kill any sane species. We've trained soldiers to fight in environments that would break any rational mind. We've weaponized technologies that most civilizations would consider too dangerous to research. He paused, his expression growing distant. We've spent our entire species' history learning how to kill things that want to kill us. If there are things out there consuming civilizations, then they're about to learn why humanity earned its way off a death world. The response transmission took 3 hours to prepare. The Xenolinguistics team worked with fragments of the alien language patterns, building a message that would hopefully convey humanity's willingness to help without revealing too much about human capabilities. When they finally broadcast the response, using the Hermes communications array boosted by 3 additional monitoring stations, the message was simple. Melodic Consortium, this is the Human Defense Alliance of Sol System. We have received your distress call. We are mobilizing military assets to render assistance. Please provide tactical information about the Devourers and coordinates for rendezvous. Humanity stands ready. The response came back in 47 minutes. The voice was the same melodic alien tone, but this time it carried something that transcended species barriers, desperate relief. The translation was clearer now, the computer's algorithms learning rapidly from the expanded linguistic sample. Human Defense Alliance, blessed be your response. We had hoped, but not dared to believe. The old archive spoke of your kind, the apex predators who learned to dream of stars. We are transmitting complete tactical data and rendezvous coordinates. Please hurry. The Devourers have consumed 3 more systems since our first transmission. They move faster than our songs can carry warnings. The data package that accompanied the transmission was staggering. Complete astronomical charts showing the locations of 47 inhabited star systems, detailed analysis of the Devourers' attack patterns, and, most chilling of all, visual records of their assaults. Chun watched in horrified fascination as the recordings played on her screens. The Devourers weren't ships or even creatures in any recognizable sense. They were something far worse. Massive organic constructs that moved between stars like living asteroids, each one the size of a small moon. When they reached a system, they began systematically consuming everything: planets, moons, and eventually the star itself, growing larger and reproducing as they fed. Torres, Chun said quietly, "Give me a count. How many individual Devourers are shown in these recordings?" The young ensign's fingers flew over his console. "Ma'am, based on the visual data, I'm counting at least 300 individual entities, each one approximately 1,500 kilometers in diameter. They appear to be moving in coordinated swarms." Chun closed her eyes and did the mathematics. 300 entities, each capable of consuming star systems, moving in an organized pattern that suggested intelligence. It was a force that could theoretically devour the entire galaxy, given sufficient time. Humanity was being asked to stand against the living embodiment of cosmic horror. The final piece of the alien data package was a star chart showing the proposed rendezvous point, a system called Threshold, positioned at the edge of melodic consortium space, approximately 4,000 light-years from Sol. According to the transmission, representatives from 17 different alien civilizations would be gathering there to coordinate their response to the Devourers. They were expecting humanity to somehow cross 4,000 light-years and arrive ready for a war that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Chun looked at the timeline included in the alien data. The Devourers' current consumption rate suggested they would reach the rendezvous system in approximately 6 standard months, which meant humanity had 6 months to develop faster-than-light travel, build a fleet capable of engaging moon-sized organic entities, and somehow travel farther from Earth than any human had ever gone. It was impossible. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of challenge that humanity had spent its entire evolutionary history preparing to meet. "Commander," Torres said softly, "there's one more thing in the data package. A linguistic analysis of the term they keep using to refer to us. The translation as apex predators who learn to dream of stars isn't quite accurate. The literal meaning is closer to death worshippers who make war songs from silence." Chun smiled, and for the first time since receiving the initial transmission, she felt something other than fear. She felt anticipation. "Torres, sent a priority message to Earth Naval Command. Tell Admiral Harrison that we have complete tactical data on the enemy and rendezvous coordinates for Allied forces. And include this personal note: sir, they're not calling us because they need peacekeepers. They're calling us because they need killers. We should probably give them what they're asking for." As the Hermes prepared to transmit humanity's response to a call for help that would reshape the galaxy, Chun watched the tactical data scroll past on her screens one more time. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, things that consumed worlds were moving toward defenseless civilizations. And somewhere else in that same darkness, humanity was about to learn whether its violent evolution had prepared it for a role it had never imagined: guardians of galactic civilization. The aliens had called for aid. Humanity was about to answer with everything it had learned about survival in a universe that wanted them dead. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council convened exactly 18 hours after the first alien transmission, and Admiral Harrison knew from the moment he walked into the war room that humanity was about to make a decision that would define their species for generations. The holographic displays surrounding the circular table showed real-time data streams from monitoring stations across the solar system. But more importantly, they showed something that had never existed before, a complete tactical analysis of an alien threat that required humanity's intervention. General Patricia Vance, head of Earth's Special Operations Command, was the first to speak. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent 30 years preparing for scenarios that politicians hoped would remain theoretical. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at a galactic-scale extinction event. Based on the alien data, these devourers have consumed approximately 40 star systems in the past 2 years. Their rate of consumption is accelerating, and their movement patterns suggest coordinated intelligence. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Xenobiology Research Institute stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she manipulated the holographic displays to show the recordings received from the Melodic Consortium. The biological analysis of these entities defies every model we have for life as we understand it. They appear to be part organic, part technological, existing in the vacuum of space without any visible support systems. Each entity masses approximately 2 trillion tons and appears capable of faster-than-light movement through unknown means. The recordings played in horrifying detail. The assembled leaders watched as moon-sized creatures descended upon inhabited worlds, their surfaces opening to reveal organic machinery that systematically broke down matter at the molecular level. Entire planets dissolved into streams of raw material that the creatures absorbed, growing larger with each feeding. Most disturbing of all, the process was clearly intentional, suggesting that the devourers weren't mindless beasts but calculated predators. Admiral Chen Wei, commanding officer of the Far-Reach Fleet, studied the tactical data with the expression of someone calculating odds. The aliens are asking us to travel 4,000 light-years to engage an enemy that can consume star systems. Our fastest experimental drives can manage maybe 50 light-years in a month, assuming they don't break down completely. The logistics alone make this mission impossible. Harrison nodded grimly. That's what makes this interesting. Show them the Prometheus project files. The holographic displays shifted to show classified schematics that only 12 people on Earth had ever seen. Dr. James Mitchell from Advanced Propulsion Research took control of the presentation. His excitement barely contained despite the dire circumstances. For the past 15 years, we've been developing faster-than-light propulsion based on theoretical frameworks that most physicists considered impossible. The Prometheus drive works by creating controlled tiers in space-time, essentially allowing a ship to step outside normal physics for brief periods. We've never tested it at full scale because the power requirements would drain Earth's entire energy grid. General Vance leaned forward. What kind of range are we talking about? Theoretical maximum range is unlimited. The drive doesn't move the ship through space. It moves space around the ship. Travel time becomes a function of processing power rather than distance. We could theoretically reach the rendezvous coordinates in 4 months. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, President Chun Martinez, Earth's civilian leader, asked the question that everyone was thinking. What's the catch, Doctor? Mitchell's expression grew somber. The technology requires exotic matter that we've only been able to produce in microscopic quantities. To power a fleet-sized deployment, we need to convert approximately 30% of Jupiter's mass into the necessary fuel. Additionally, the ships themselves would need to be constructed using materials that don't technically exist yet. Dr. Sarah Kim from Materials Engineering stepped in. That's where Project Iron Forge becomes relevant. We've been developing molecular assemblers capable of constructing materials with properties that exceed anything in nature. The process requires enormous energy input, but it can produce substances with structural strength and thermal resistance that would allow ships to survive inside stellar coronas. Harrison watched the faces around the table as the implications sank in. What we're discussing is the largest technological leap in human history, accomplished in 6 months, to fight an enemy that represents an existential threat not just to humanity, but to galactic civilization itself. President Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, in your professional assessment, do we have any chance of success? Harrison's smile was cold and predatory. Madam President, every military simulation we've run suggests that conventional warfare against these entities is suicide. They're too large, too numerous, and too powerful for any traditional approach. But we're not approaching this conventionally. He manipulated the holographic displays to show new schematics, designs that had been theoretical until 18 hours ago. The aliens called us because their archives contained references to humanity as a warrior species. What they didn't understand is that humans don't just make war. We make war in ways that other species can't comprehend. The first schematic showed a ship design unlike anything in human space doctrine. Rather than the sleek, efficient vessels that had carried humanity to the outer planets, these were angular, aggressive constructs bristling with weapon systems that seemed designed for close-quarters combat with entities the size of moons. The Retribution-class assault ships are designed around a single principle: getting close enough to these creatures to kill them from the inside. Each ship carries a crew of 300, equipped with weapons and armor designed for boarding operations against entities that exist in the vacuum of space. General Vance studied the specifications with professional interest. Admiral, these specifications suggest boarding operations against creatures 2,000 kilometers in diameter. How exactly does that work? The same way humanity has approached every impossible problem in our history. We're going to figure it out by doing it. Harrison's expression grew distant. The aliens called us death worshippers who make war songs from silence. They called us apex predators who learn to dream of stars. What they're really saying is that they understand what we are: a species that evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us, that learned cooperation through warfare, that developed technology by weaponizing everything we encountered. Dr. Vasquez looked uncomfortable. Admiral, with respect, we're talking about deploying human military forces against entities that we don't understand, using technology that doesn't exist yet, in coordination with alien species we've never met. Yes, Harrison replied simply. And the question hung in the air for a moment before President Martinez spoke. Admiral, I need you to be completely honest. Are you recommending this course of action because you believe we can succeed, or because you believe we have no choice? Harrison considered the question carefully. Madam President, based on the alien data, the Devourer's expansion pattern will reach human space in approximately 40 years if left unchecked. We can either fight them now, alongside allies who know their capabilities, or we can fight them later, alone, after they've consumed everything between here and there. He paused, looking around the table at the assembled leaders. But that's not why I'm recommending immediate deployment. I'm recommending it because for the first time in human history, we have the opportunity to do something that matters on a galactic scale. These aliens called us because somewhere in their archives, they have records of what humanity becomes when it's threatened. They're giving us the chance to be what we've always been: the species that survives by making sure the things that want to kill us die first. The vote was unanimous. Over the following weeks, Earth transformed into something resembling a military-industrial complex from humanity's most desperate historical periods, but operating on a scale that dwarfed anything previously imagined. The Prometheus Drive project consumed resources that required rationing civilian power across 3 continents. The Iron Forge molecular assemblers worked continuously, converting raw materials into substances that theoretical physics suggested shouldn't be able to exist in normal spacetime. The construction facilities established in the asteroid belt operated around the clock, building ships designed for combat scenarios that no human had ever experienced. Each Retribution-class assault ship incorporated technologies that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. Armor plating constructed from materials stronger than neutron star crusts, weapon systems that could theoretically crack planetoids, and life support systems designed to function inside the bodies of creatures that existed in interstellar vacuum. But The most remarkable transformation was happening to humanity itself. The recruitment criteria for the Galactic Deployment Force require volunteers willing to leave Earth with no guarantee of return to fight enemies beyond human understanding, using tactics that would be developed during the mission. The response was overwhelming. Colonel Marcus Thompson, recently appointed commander of the 1st Galactic Assault Division, found himself reviewing personnel files for soldiers who represented the peak of human military evolution. These weren't just warriors. They were problem solvers who specialized in surviving impossible situations through superior violence. Sergeant Liu Chun, Thompson read from his tablet, expert in xenobiology combat applications, veteran of the Titan mining wars, specialized training in zero-gravity boarding operations. Volunteered for galactic deployment with the notation, "Finally, something interesting." His aide, Lieutenant Sarah Park, looked up from her own stack of files. "Sir, every volunteer we've interviewed has said essentially the same thing. They're not afraid of the unknown. They're excited by it." Thompson nodded. It made sense in a way that probably wouldn't make sense to any other species. Humanity had spent its entire evolutionary history being selected for individuals who responded to mortal threats with aggressive curiosity. The soldiers volunteering for galactic deployment weren't aberrant. They were the logical culmination of human military evolution. The technical challenges of the mission were staggering, but they were being solved with a combination of human ingenuity and desperate necessity that had characterized every major technological breakthrough in human history. The Prometheus drives were successfully tested at quarter power, opening tiers in space-time that allowed test probes to travel distances that should have required months in mere hours. The molecular assemblers achieved stable production of the exotic materials needed for ship construction, creating substances with properties that allowed them to exist in conditions that would destroy conventional matter. Most importantly, the weapon systems designed for engagement with the Devourers passed their initial tests, demonstrating the ability to deliver focused energy bursts capable of damaging targets with mass measured in trillions of tons. But perhaps the most significant development was the establishment of humanity's first galactic communication network. Using modifications to the quantum transmission technology reverse-engineered from the alien broadcasts, Earth was now in constant communication with the Melodic Consortium and their allies. The conversations that emerged from these exchanges revealed a galaxy-wide civilization that had achieved peace through specialization, with different species contributing different capabilities to a collaborative interstellar culture. The aliens were scientists, artists, philosophers, and engineers who had transcended warfare through mutual cooperation. What they had never developed was the capability to defend themselves against something that wanted to consume them. That was what they needed from humanity. The final briefing before deployment took place aboard the flagship Vengeance, the first completed Retribution-class assault ship. Admiral Harrison stood before an assembly of humanity's finest military personnel, looking out at faces that showed no fear, only anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 48 hours we will undertake the first faster-than-light voyage in human history, traveling further from Earth than our species has ever gone, to fight an enemy that represents everything we evolved to survive. We are going to save civilizations that have existed for thousands of years longer than human space travel, using weapons and tactics that we're going to develop while fighting." He paused, studying the faces before him. The aliens called us because their archives suggested that humanity might be capable of this mission. What they didn't understand is that this isn't just what we're capable of, this is what we're for. The cheers that erupted from the assembled soldiers echoed through the ship's corridors, a sound that would have been familiar to human warriors throughout history. The battle cry of a species that had learned to survive by ensuring that anything threatening them died first. As the fleet prepared for departure, Earth's monitoring stations received one final transmission from the galactic rendezvous point. The voice was different this time. Not the melodic tones of the Melodic Consortium, but something that sounded almost crystalline, like voices speaking through manufactured sound systems. "Human Defense Alliance, this is the synthetic collective of the Fourth Spiral. We have been monitoring your communications with our organic allies. We wish to express anticipation regarding your arrival. Our calculations suggest that your species approaches warfare with methodologies that complement our technological capabilities. We believe that together, we may be able to achieve what none of us could accomplish alone: the complete elimination of the Devourer threat. The transmission continued with technical specifications for weapons systems that the Synthetic Collective had developed specifically for integration with human tactical doctrine. Energy weapons designed to be fired from inside Devourer entities, molecular disruptors optimized for organic targets, and, most intriguingly, something called reality anchor technology that could prevent faster-than-light escape by creatures attempting to flee combat. As the human fleet prepared to leave Sol System for the first time in history, the galaxy was preparing to witness something that had never existed before: the military coordination of species that had evolved for different aspects of warfare, combining their capabilities against an enemy that threatened everything they had built. The aliens had called for aid, not understanding exactly what they were asking for. Humanity was about to show them what happened when apex predators learned to dream of stars and were given a reason to wake up. The Threshold system existed at the edge of known space, a collection of dead worlds orbiting a dying star that had been chosen as the rendezvous point precisely because it offered no strategic value to the Devourers. When a human fleet materialized from their faster-than-light jump, Admiral Harrison found himself looking at something no human had ever seen: a galactic navy assembled from 17 different species, all united by desperation and the shared knowledge that failure meant the end of civilization as they knew it. The alien ships were beautiful in ways that human engineering had never achieved. The vessels of the Melodic Consortium appeared to have been grown rather than built, their organic curves suggesting musical instruments scaled up to battleship proportions. The Synthetic Collective ships were geometric perfection, crystalline constructs that seemed to bend light around their surfaces. Other species had contributed vessels that defied easy description, ships that appeared to be made of liquid metal, others that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, and one massive construct that looked like a living nebula held in the shape of a sword. But, as impressive as the alien fleet appeared, Harrison could see the problem immediately. These were not warships in any sense that humanity would recognize. They were exploration vessels, scientific platforms, and art projects pressed into military service by civilizations that had forgotten how to make war. Even the ship's weapons systems appeared to be improvised modifications of mining equipment and industrial tools. The human fleet, by contrast, looked exactly like what it was: a collection of purpose-built killing machines designed by species that had learned warfare as a survival skill. The Retribution-class assault ships were angular, aggressive constructs bristling with weapons that had been designed specifically for close-quarters combat with entities the size of moons. Compared to the graceful alien vessels, the human ships looked brutally functional, like predatory animals among butterflies. The first interspecies military conference in galactic history took place aboard the Melodic Consortium flagship Symphony of Distant Stars, and Harrison quickly realized that humanity's role in this alliance was going to be very different from what anyone had expected. The alien commanders were brilliant scientists and philosophers, but they approached warfare with the same theoretical mindset they applied to artistic composition or mathematical research. Commander Veltar of the Melodic Consortium spoke in harmonious tones that the translation matrix rendered as music punctuated by words. "Admiral Harrison, we are deeply grateful for humanity's response to our call for assistance. Our combined fleet represents the greatest military force assembled in galactic history, with contributions from civilizations spanning 4 spiral arms." Harrison studied the tactical displays showing the assembled fleet's capabilities. "Commander, with respect, I'm looking at exploration vessels and research ships. What exactly is your combat experience?" The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Unit Prime of the Synthetic Collective responded with the crystalline precision that characterized their species' communication. Admiral Harrison, the civilizations represented in this alliance have not engaged in warfare for approximately 4,000 standard years. Our understanding of military tactics comes primarily from historical archives and theoretical research. What about weapons testing, combat simulations, any practical experience with ship-to-ship combat? Another pause. Commander Zeph of the Crystal Singers, whose species communicated through controlled photonic emissions, created a display that the translation systems interpreted as profound embarrassment. Admiral, the concept of deliberately testing weapons against living targets is culturally problematic for most of our species. We have extensively modeled the theoretical performance of our systems. Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental controls. You're telling me that we're facing an enemy that has consumed 40-star systems, and none of you have ever actually fired your weapons in combat. The admission that followed revealed the true scope of the challenge facing the Galactic Alliance. The assembled species had achieved technological capabilities that dwarf humanity's wildest ambitions, but they had done so by specializing in cooperation and problem-solving rather than warfare. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level, create faster-than-light communication networks spanning entire galaxies, and terraform planets in a matter of months. But they had never learned to kill efficiently. That was where humanity came in. Ladies, gentlemen, and synthetic entities, Harrison said, addressing the assembled alien commanders, I need you to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't approach warfare as a theoretical exercise. We approach it as applied problem-solving, where failure means death. That means everything we do is designed to kill the enemy before they can kill us. He activated the holographic displays to show the human fleet's tactical capabilities. Your species have contributed technologies that we could never have developed independently. But we're going to use those technologies in ways that you probably haven't considered. The presentation that followed introduced the alien commanders to human concepts of warfare that they had never encountered. The idea of boarding operations against entities existing in the vacuum of space. The strategic use of sacrificial attacks to create tactical advantages. Most importantly, the human doctrine of escalation. The principle that if an enemy could survive your current level of violence, you increased the level of violence until they couldn't. Commander Veltar's musical tones carried a note of distress. Admiral, these tactics appear to accept significant casualties among your own forces as an acceptable outcome. Commander, our species evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to be willing to die fighting. That's not a philosophical position. It's practical experience accumulated over millions of years of natural selection. The aliens exchange communications in frequencies and formats that the translation systems couldn't interpret, clearly discussing concepts that had no equivalent in their peaceful civilizations. Finally, Unit Prime spoke for the group. Admiral Harrison, we acknowledge that humanity possesses military expertise that our alliance lacks. We are prepared to accept human tactical command of combined operations, with the understanding that your species will implement strategies that may conflict with our cultural preferences. Harrison nodded grimly. That's exactly what we're going to do. And that brings us to the practical question. How much time do we have before the Devourers reach this system? The tactical analysis that emerged from the combined intelligence gathering capabilities of 17 species painted a picture that was both terrifying and strategically useful. The Devourers moved in coordinated swarms, but their consumption patterns followed predictable routes determined by stellar density and gravitational mechanics. More importantly, they appear to be vulnerable during their feeding phases when they extended their organic machinery to break down planetary matter. The primary swarm is currently consuming the Helix Nebula system, approximately 4 light-years from our position, reported Science Commander Trilek of the Quantum Researchers. Based on their historical consumption rates, they will complete feeding operations in approximately 37 standard days, then begin movement toward the next target system. Harrison studied the projections with professional interest. Which system is next on their route? Analysis suggests they will target the threshold system. This position was chosen as our rendezvous point because it appeared strategically insignificant, but the Devourers appear to consume systems in order of gravitational efficiency rather than strategic value. The irony was profound. The Galactic Alliance had chosen their rally point specifically because it seemed worthless, only to discover that they had positioned themselves directly in the path of their enemy's advance. But Harrison found himself smiling as the implications sank in. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually perfect. We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We're going to hit them while they're feeding, when they're vulnerable and spread out across multiple targets. The battle plan that emerged over the following days was unlike anything in the military history of any participating species. Human tactical doctrine was combined with alien technologies to create strategies that none of them could have developed independently. The Melodic Consortium's harmonic resonance weapons were integrated with human targeting systems to create focused disruption beams capable of interfering with devourer organic processes. The Synthetic Collective's reality anchor technology was mounted on human assault ships to prevent enemy faster-than-light escape. Most importantly, the various species' manufacturing capabilities were combined to produce weapons and equipment designed specifically for the unique challenges of fighting creatures that existed in interstellar space. But the most significant development was the emergence of integrated crews aboard the human assault ships. Alien specialists were embedded with human soldiers to create mixed-species combat teams that combined human tactical aggression with alien technological capabilities. Sergeant Lu Chun found herself working alongside harmonic specialist Velnai of the Melodic Consortium, learning to coordinate human boarding tactics with alien sonic weapons that could theoretically disrupt molecular bonds in organic targets. The cultural differences were staggering. Velnai's species expressed emotion through musical harmony, while Lu's training emphasized silent movement and sudden violence, but they were developing communication methods that transcended species barriers. Sergeant Lu, Velnai sang in frequencies that the translation matrix rendered as curious harmony. Your tactical doctrine emphasizes entering the devourer entities through breach points created by explosive decompression. This seems remarkably similar to the feeding patterns of parasitic organisms from our homeworld. Lu grinned, checking the charge levels on her plasma rifle. That's exactly what it is. Humans learned warfare by studying predator-prey relationships on our homeworld. Every tactic we use is based on something that evolution taught us about killing efficiently. The collaborative weapons development that emerged from these mixed crews produced equipment that exceeded anything any single species could have achieved. Human kinetic weapons were enhanced with alien energy manipulation technology to create projectiles that could maintain coherence in vacuum while delivering devastating impact against organic targets. Alien defensive systems were integrated with human armor designs to create protective equipment that could function inside the bodies of creatures existing in interstellar space. Most remarkably, the combined technological capabilities of the Alliance allowed them to address the fundamental problem of fighting enemies that were too large to engage using conventional tactics. The Devourers were approximately 1,500 kilometers in diameter, but their internal structure appeared to be complex networks of organic machinery rather than solid mass. Human analysis suggested that they could be killed through coordinated internal attacks that disrupted their biological processes, but actually reaching their vulnerable systems required infiltration tactics that no single species could accomplish alone. The solution was boarding torpedoes, human-designed penetration vehicles equipped with alien stealth technology that could punch through devourer external defenses and deliver mixed-species assault teams directly into the creature's internal systems. Each torpedo carried a crew of 20 soldiers and specialists, equipped with weapons designed to function in environments that would kill most forms of life. As the fleet prepared for the first coordinated galactic military operation in 4,000 years, Harrison found himself reviewing after-action reports from the alien intelligence networks that revealed the true scope of what they were facing. The Devourers weren't just consuming inhabited systems. They were systematically eliminating every trace of technological civilization they encountered, suggesting that their attacks were strategic rather than simply predatory. Admiral, Commander Voltar reported during their final pre-battle briefing, "Our long-range sensors have confirmed movement in the Helix Nebula system. The Devourers have completed their consumption of the primary inhabited worlds and are beginning to feed on the system's star. Energy output suggests they are preparing for faster-than-light transit." Harrison nodded, feeling the familiar pre-combat tension that had characterized every significant military operation in his career. "How long until they arrive in our system?" "Approximately 60 hours. Then it's time." Harrison activated the fleet-wide communication system, addressing soldiers and specialists from 17 different species who were about to undertake the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. "All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. In 60 hours, we're going to face an enemy that represents existential threat to every civilization in this galaxy. We're going to use tactics that have never been tested with equipment that didn't exist a month ago alongside allies we've never fought beside." He paused, looking out at the display showing the combined fleet. Elegant alien vessels positioned alongside brutal human warships, all united by necessity and the shared understanding that failure meant the end of everything they were fighting to protect. But here's what the enemy doesn't understand about galactic civilization. We're not just scientists and artists and philosophers. We're not just warriors and predators. We're problem solvers who have spent our entire evolutionary history learning how to survive things that want to kill us. And today we're going to teach them why that was a mistake. The communications channels erupted in responses from 17 different species. Musical harmonies from the Melodic Consortium, crystalline precision from the Synthetic Collective, photonic displays from the Crystal Singers, and from the human ships, the unmistakable sound of soldiers preparing for battle. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient horrors that had consumed civilizations for millennia were moving toward what they assumed would be another easy feeding. They were about to discover what happened when the galaxy's children decided to fight back. They came out of faster-than-light transit like a plague of living asteroids, their massive forms blotting out the stars as they entered the threshold system. Admiral Harrison watched from the Bridge of the Vengeance as 17 Devourer entities materialized across a volume of space larger than Earth's entire solar system, each one a moon-sized horror that moved with purpose and terrible intelligence. The enemy was even more terrifying in person than the alien recordings had suggested. The Devourers weren't ships or creatures in any recognizable sense. They were something that existed at the intersection of biology and technology, organic constructs whose surfaces rippled with patterns that suggested both neural networks and circuit boards. As they moved into the system, they began to emit signals that the Alliance fleet's sensors interpreted as communication between the entities, coordinated hunting calls that had no equivalent in any known language. "All ships, this is Admiral Harrison," he broadcast across the combined fleet's communication network. "Enemy contact confirmed. 17 primary targets, mass approximately 2 trillion tons each, moving in coordinated formation. Execute Battle Plan Omega." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The alien vessels, despite their lack of combat experience, moved with precision that reflected thousands of years of technological sophistication. The Melodic Consortium ships began broadcasting harmonic frequencies designed to interfere with Devourer biological processes, creating standing wave patterns that should theoretically disrupt their internal communication systems. The Synthetic Collective's crystalline vessels activated reality anchor fields, preventing the enemy from escaping to faster-than-light speeds. The Crystal Singers created focused photonic displays that serve as targeting guides for the entire fleet. But it was the human ships that initiated actual combat, and the difference was immediately apparent. where the alien vessels approached warfare as an extension of their scientific expertise. The human fleet attacked with coordinated violence that had been refined through millennia of evolutionary pressure. The Retribution-class assault ships moved like predatory animals, using the alien support systems to close distance with their targets while maintaining formation patterns that maximize their striking power. Torpedo crews, prepare for launch, Harrison ordered, watching as the tactical displays showed the human ships closing to engagement range. Remember, we're not trying to destroy these things from the outside. We're going to kill them from within. The boarding torpedoes launched in coordinated salvos, each one carrying a mixed-species assault team equipped with weapons and equipment designed specifically for combat inside creatures that existed in the vacuum of space. Sergeant Lu Chun felt the acceleration forces pressing her into her crash harness as her torpedo punched through the void toward the nearest devourer, its nose cone glowing with alien energy fields designed to penetrate the target's external defenses. 30 seconds to impact, announced harmonic specialist Velnai, her musical tones translated through the torpedo's communication system. Resonance weapons charged and ready. External sensors detect significant biological activity in the target's outer layers. Lu checked her plasma rifle and the specialized breaching charges that would allow her team to move through the Devourer's internal structure. Copy that. All crew, remember the briefing. These things are part machine, part organism. That means they can be killed, but we need to reach their core processing systems to do it effectively. The impact was like being fired from a cannon into a living mountain. The torpedo's alien design penetration system carved through the Devourer's external layers, revealing interior spaces that defied human understanding. They weren't corridors or chambers in any architectural sense, but organic tunnels and cavities that pulsed with biological processes while simultaneously displaying the geometric precision of manufactured systems. Jesus Christ, whispered Private Torres as the assault team moved through their entry point into the creature's interior. It's like being inside a computer that's made of meat. The internal structure was even more disturbing than the external appearance had suggested. The walls around them weren't constructed. They were grown, organic surfaces that incorporated metallic components in patterns that suggested neural networks operating on a macro scale. More disturbing still, the spaces they moved through showed clear signs of intelligence, with passages that seemed to reconfigure themselves in response to the intruder's movement. Velnai, are you getting any kind of coherent readings from those resonance scanners? Lu asked as they advanced through a tunnel that appeared to be lined with what looked like technological nerve endings. Sergeant, the harmonic patterns I'm detecting suggest that this entire entity functions as a single neural network. The biological and technological components aren't separate systems. They're integrated aspects of a unified organism that processes information and responds to stimuli in ways that exceed our current understanding of consciousness. Lu felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental conditions inside their target. Are you saying these things are intelligent? I'm saying that each individual devourer appears to possess cognitive capabilities that dwarf those of most planetary civilizations. And based on the communication patterns we detected during their approach, they appear to be networked with each other in ways that create a collective intelligence spanning the entire swarm. The tactical implications were staggering. The Galactic Alliance wasn't fighting mindless predators. They were engaged in combat with entities that might represent the most sophisticated form of intelligence ever encountered. But Lu had spent her entire military career learning to kill things that were smarter, stronger, and more dangerous than she was, and the principles remained the same regardless of scale. Team, advance to Objective Alpha, she ordered, leading her mixed-species assault group deeper into the creature's body. Intel was right about the internal structure. These things have centralized control systems that we should be able to reach if we can navigate the biological maze. The journey through the Devourer's interior was like moving through a living cathedral designed by something that understood both organic growth and technological precision. The passages they followed pulsed with energy flows that served as both circulatory and data transmission systems, while the walls around them displayed geometric patterns that suggested information processing on a scale that required planetary-level computational resources. But, more importantly, the creature was responding to their presence. The passages began to constrict around them, while new openings appeared that seemed designed to direct their movement towards specific destinations. It was becoming clear that they weren't infiltrating an enemy. They were being herded by something that understood their tactical objectives and was prepared to counter them. All teams, this is Harrison. The Admiral's voice crackled through their communication systems. External analysis suggests that the Devourers are adapting to our boarding tactics in real time. We're detecting structural changes in all target entities that appear designed to neutralize internal threats. Lou felt the familiar surge of combat adrenaline that had characterized every successful mission in her career. Understood, Admiral. But they're making the same mistake that every smart enemy makes. They're assuming that understanding our tactics is the same as being able to counter them. The truth was that human military doctrine had always been based on fighting enemies that were larger, smarter, and more technologically advanced than humanity. Every human soldier was trained to operate under the assumption that their enemy would be superior in every measurable way except one: the willingness to accept casualties in order to achieve tactical objectives. The Devourers were intelligent, but they were also individuals. They could be hurt, and they could be killed, and that made them vulnerable to tactics that had been developed by a species that had learned warfare through necessity rather than choice. Velnai, can your resonance weapons disrupt the neural networking that connects these passages? Theoretically, yes, but doing so would likely cause significant structural damage to this section of the entity. Perfect. Do it. The harmonic weapon's discharge was unlike anything Lou had experienced. Rather than the explosive violence of human weapons, the alien technology created a standing wave pattern that interfered with the target's biological processes at the molecular level. The effect was immediate and devastating. The organic walls around them began to convulse as their neural connections were severed, creating openings that led directly toward the center of the creature. But the Devourer's response revealed the true scope of the intelligence they were fighting. Instead of simply trying to repair the damage, the entity began rerouting its internal systems to isolate the affected area while simultaneously flooding their location with defensive organisms that appeared to be specifically designed to counter human physiology. The creatures that emerged from the walls were like nothing in Earth's biological history. Part antibody, part security system, they moved through the vacuum with purpose and coordination that suggested they had been manufactured specifically to deal with infiltrators. But they had been designed to counter species that approached warfare as a theoretical problem rather than a survival skill. Lou's plasma rifle cut through the defensive organisms with efficiency that reflected thousands of hours of training in combat scenarios that most species would consider impossible. Her human teammates moved with coordination that had been developed through evolutionary pressure, while their alien partners provided technological capabilities that allowed them to function in environments that should have killed them immediately. Torres breached charges on the structural weak points that Velnai identified. Everyone else covering fire. We're going to punch through to the core systems and shut this thing down from the inside. The coordinated assault that followed was a textbook example of human tactical doctrine adapted for combat scenarios that no human had ever imagined. Explosive charges created openings that allowed the team to advance toward their objective, while sustained weapons fire suppressed defensive responses that might have overwhelmed less coordinated forces. But most importantly, they were fighting with the kind of focused aggression that had characterized human warfare throughout history. The willingness to accept risks and casualties in order to achieve objectives that less desperate species would consider impossible. The Devourer's core systems were revealed to be even more remarkable than the external intelligence had suggested. They entered a chamber that appeared to exist partially outside normal space-time, where streams of data flowed through crystalline structures that incorporated both technological precision and organic adaptability. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly hostile to everything that galactic civilization represented. Velnai, can you interface with these systems? Sergeant, this technology exceeds anything in our databases. But the harmonic pattern suggests that I can disrupt their core processing functions if I can establish a direct connection. Do it. Torres, set up defensive positions. If this thing has any kind of automated immune response, it's going to throw everything it has at us once we start damaging its brain. The battle that followed would become legendary in the military histories of 17 different species. Human soldiers fought defensive actions against entities that had been designed to counter every form of warfare that peaceful civilizations could imagine, while their alien partners interfaced with technologies that represented millions of years of hostile evolution. But the Devourers had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had adapted to counter the military capabilities of civilizations that approached warfare as a necessary evil, something to be minimized and contained. They were not prepared to fight a species that had learned warfare as a survival skill and refined it through cultural development that treated violence as a legitimate solution to problems that couldn't be resolved through negotiation. Core systems disrupted, Velnai reported, her harmonic tones carrying notes of triumph that transcended species barriers. The entity's central processing functions are cascading toward complete failure. Neural networking is collapsing across all major systems. Through the Torpedo's communication link, they could hear Admiral Harrison coordinating the battle across all 17 target entities. All teams, this is Harrison. Core penetration successful on targets Alpha through Kilo. Enemy formation is breaking apart. Remaining entities are attempting faster-than-light escape, but the synthetic collective's reality anchors are holding them in normal space. The victory was more complete than anyone had dared to hope. The Devourers, faced with coordinated assault tactics that they had never encountered, found themselves unable to adapt quickly enough to counter strategies that combined human tactical aggression with alien technological capabilities. One by one, the massive entities succumbed to internal attacks that disrupted their biological processes and technological systems simultaneously. But the most significant victory was the demonstration that galactic civilization could defend itself when its constituent species combined their capabilities effectively. The peaceful aliens had provided technologies that humanity could never have developed independently, while human tactical doctrine had provided the strategic framework necessary to use those technologies against enemies that represented existential threats. As the last Devourer died, its massive form drifting lifeless through the void, Harrison found himself addressing representatives from 17 species who had just witnessed something unprecedented. The successful defense of galactic civilization against forces that had seemed unstoppable. Ladies, gentlemen, and synthetic entities, he said, looking out at the communications links that connected him to commanders whose species had just learned that they were no longer helpless against the universe's more hostile elements. Today we proved something important. When the galaxy's children work together, there's nothing in this universe that can stand against us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Harmonic celebrations from a melodic consortium, crystalline precision acknowledgments from the synthetic collective, photonic displays of triumph from the crystal singers, and from the human ships, the unmistakable sound of soldiers who had just won a battle that mattered. But Admiral Harrison knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were other threats out there, threats that would require the combined capabilities of species that had learned to fight together. The aliens had called for aid, and humanity had answered with fire and steel. But what they had built together was something more powerful than either could have achieved alone, a galactic defense alliance that could protect civilization itself. In the years that followed, the Threshold Battle would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy's peaceful species learned that they didn't have to be victims of forces beyond their control. They had allies who specialized in violence, and those allies had taught them that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be better at war than anything that threatened it. The aliens had called for aid. Humanity had answered, and Together, they had lit a fire in the darkness between stars that would burn for as long as civilization needed protection from the things that wanted to devour it. The universe was vast and filled with horrors, but it was also filled with species who had learned to work together. And when the galaxy's children stood united, there was nothing in the cosmos that could stand against them.